My family skipped my biggest night. The night of my first gallery opening didn't feel real. Not because I was nervous, but because for the first time in my life, something I created was finally being seen. I had spent weeks preparing, adjusting every frame, fixing every light, making sure everything looked exactly how I imagined it. And in one corner of the room, I set up something small, 6 chairs, reserved, for my family. My mom said she'd come, not excited, not proud, just casual. We'll try to make it. And somehow, I held on to that try more than I should have. My name is Sienna Brooks. I'm 28 years old. And that night, I learned the difference between being supported and being seen. Before I show you what happened that night, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Because this story isn't about art, it's about who shows up and who doesn't. I had been working toward that night for months, late evenings, early mornings, fixing details no one else would notice. Because to me, it mattered. Not just the art, but what it meant. It was the first time I wasn't hiding it, not calling it a side thing, not brushing it off. This time, it was real. When I invited my family, I kept it simple, sent the details, the time, the location. No pressure, because I already knew how they saw it. That's nice. You've always liked drawing. It's good to have hobbies. That word, hobby, always stayed with me. The morning of the event, I arrived early, walked through the space slowly, checked everything twice. Then I placed the chairs, 6 of them, together, in the corner. Not too close, not too far, just enough to feel included, and for a moment, I let myself believe they'd be filled. When the doors opened, people started coming in. Strangers, couples, a few artists, some curious, some serious. And I greeted them, smiled, answered questions, but in between every moment, I kept looking at the door. Every time it opened, my chest lifted, just for a second, then dropped again, because it wasn't them. Minutes passed, then more, and I kept telling myself, they're just late, they'll come. They said they'd try. An hour in, the chairs were still empty, untouched, unmoved, and that's when it started to sink in. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, the kind of realization that doesn't hit loudly. It just settles. I checked my phone. Once. Then again. Nothing. No message. No update. No explanation. Just silence. And somehow, that silence said everything. Then I made a mistake. I opened social media, and there it was. A photo. My mom. My aunt. A few relatives. Sitting at a table. Dressed up. Smiling. Laughing. Caption: family nights are the best. I stared at it longer than I should have, not because I was shocked, but because a part of me still hoped that this time would be different, that this time I would matter enough to show up for. I locked my phone, put it away, and turned back to the room, because people were still there, still looking, still asking questions. And I smiled again. Not fake, practiced. Because sometimes you learn how to keep going, even when something inside you stops. If you think this is where the story ends, you're wrong. Because what happened next changed everything in that room. Are you here alone? The voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned slightly. A woman stood near one of my paintings. Not rushing, not distracted, just observing. The way she looked at the piece was different, not casual, not polite, intentional. I smiled automatically, the kind of smile you give when you don't want to explain anything. Yeah, It's just me. She nodded slowly, like she understood more than I actually said. She didn't ask too many questions, didn't make small talk. Instead, she moved from one painting to another, slowly, carefully, stopping longer than anyone else had. And I noticed something. She wasn't just looking, she was studying. Every detail, every texture, every choice. And for the first time that night, I felt seen. She didn't compliment loudly, didn't overreact, didn't say things just to be nice. Instead, she just said simple things. This one feels honest. This one is different. And somehow, those words meant more than everything else I had heard that night, because they weren't surface level. They were real. After a few minutes, she nodded once, then stepped back. I'll come back. That's all she said. No promise, no explanation, just that one sentence. And then she left, and I watched her walk out, not expecting anything more. Because by that point, I had already accepted how the night would end. People kept coming, looking, asking questions, smiling, complimenting, and I responded to all of it, answered politely, stayed present. But inside, something stayed quiet, because no matter how many people walked in, the chairs in the corner stayed empty. Near the end, I started taking things down, slowly, not rushed, just carefully, like I was trying to stretch the moment, because once everything came down, it would be over, and I wasn't ready to admit that yet. Then I heard footsteps, soft, steady. I looked up, and there she was again, the same woman, standing in the center of the room. But this time, she wasn't passing through. She was staying. She moved slower now, even more focused than before, stopping at pieces she had already seen, looking longer, like she was reconsidering something. And I stood there quietly, watching her, because something about this moment felt different. She turned to me, calm, certain. I think I made a mistake. I blinked slightly, confused. She continued. Earlier, I almost bought just one. My hand stilled, because now, this wasn't casual anymore. She smiled slightly, then said, I don't want one. Pause. Just long enough for it to settle. Then, I want all of them. For a second, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't understand, but because I wasn't ready for what that meant. Everything. Every piece. Every moment I thought no one was watching suddenly mattered. If you think that was the biggest moment, you're wrong. Because what she said next changed everything inside me. For a few seconds, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't hear her, but because my mind hadn't caught up yet. All of them. That sentence kept repeating in my head. Every painting, every piece, everything I had created, in moments no one saw, in nights no one asked about, suddenly had value, real value. And I just stood there, trying to understand what that meant. I looked at her carefully, still unsure. All of them? She nodded. No hesitation. Yes. Simple. Clear. Like it wasn't a big decision for her. But for me, it was everything. Because this wasn't just about selling art. It was about being seen. For the first time, without needing to explain myself. After that, everything felt different. The same space, the same walls, the same people. But the energy shifted. People started noticing. Whispers, glances, questions. Did she just buy everything? And for the first time that night, I wasn't invisible anymore. While everything around us changed, she stayed calm, unaffected. She looked around once more, then back at me. I almost didn't come tonight. That sentence hit me instantly, because I understood it. The hesitation, the delay, the almost. Then she added, "I'm glad I did." That line stayed with me, not because it sounded nice, but because it felt real, because she almost missed it. Just like my family did. But the difference was, she showed up anyway. And that one decision changed everything. I didn't pack things up after that. Not the same way. Because now, it wasn't a quiet ending. People stayed longer, talked more, asked different questions, and I answered. Not carefully, confidently, because something inside me had shifted. That night, when I got home, I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt calm, clear, because it wasn't about the sale. Not really. It was about proof. Proof that what I created mattered, even if the people closest to me didn't see it. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop. Notifications, messages, calls, and I didn't even need to open them. I already knew why. Because news travels fast, especially when people realize they missed something important. I opened them slowly, one by one. "We saw your post. Why didn't you tell us it was this big? We would have come if we knew." I read every message, carefully, because something about them didn't sit right. Then I replied, just once. Simple, clear. "I did tell you." Pause. "You just had other plans." And after that, I stopped responding, because there was nothing left to explain. If you think that's where it ended, you're wrong. Because a few days later, they showed up at my door. A few days later, there was a knock on my door. Not loud, not urgent, familiar. I already knew who it was. I didn't rush to open it. I just stood there for a second, looking at the door, because this moment felt expected, not surprising, not emotional, just inevitable. Then I reached forward and opened it. They were all there. My mom, my aunt, a few relatives, standing close together, smiling, holding small gifts, like they were arriving for something they hadn't missed, like nothing had happened. And for a moment, it looked normal. But it wasn't. Because now, I could see it clearly. They walked in slightly, not fully, just enough to feel comfortable. My mom spoke first. "We're so proud of you." That word, proud, felt different now. Not warm, not real, delayed. And I stood there, listening, without reacting. They talked about the sale first. Not the paintings, not the night, not how I felt. The sale. My aunt smiled and said, "So, who bought them?" My mom added softly, "This could open doors for all of us." And that's when I understood. They didn't come because they finally saw me. They came because everyone else did. I looked at my mom, really looked this time, not the way I used to. Not with expectation, not with hope, just clarity. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to understand her. I was understanding the pattern. I spoke calmly, no emotion in my voice. "You didn't think it was worth showing up for." The room went quiet. No one interrupted. No one corrected me. Because that sentence didn't need explanation. They didn't argue, didn't deny it, didn't try to change the story. Because deep down, they knew. They knew they chose something else. They knew they didn't show up. And now, they were standing in front of that truth. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse them further. Because anger wasn't what I felt anymore. It wasn't disappointment either. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't need to fight. It just sets boundaries. I stepped back slightly, not enough to invite them in, just enough to show distance. A small movement, but it said everything. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to pull them closer. I was letting them see where they stood. No one spoke after that. No one pushed forward. Because now, they understood. Not what they missed. What they could no longer access. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain my pain. I just felt done. If you think I let them back in, you're wrong. Because what I did next made the boundary permanent. They stood there, waiting, expecting something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe an invitation, maybe the version of me who would make it easier for them. But I didn't move. I didn't step aside. I didn't open the door wider. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to close the distance. I was letting it exist. And that silence said more than anything I could have explained. My mom shifted slightly, her voice softer now. We didn't know it was that important. I looked at her calmly. That sentence used to work on me. It made me explain. It made me soften. It made me forgive too quickly. But this time, I didn't translate my pain for them. I didn't raise my voice, didn't let emotion take over. I just said, it always meant this much. Pause. You just never asked. And that was it. No explanation. No long speech. Because the truth didn't need to be repeated. They didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't correct me. Because now, the situation had changed. Before, I was the one hoping they'd understand. Now, they were the ones standing there, realizing they never tried to. My aunt stepped forward slightly, holding out a small gift bag. We brought something for you. I looked at it for a second, then gently pushed it back. You don't have to. Because it wasn't about fixing it. It wasn't about replacing the moment. That night couldn't be recreated. They tried again. Small explanations, half apologies. We thought it was casual. We didn't realize. We would have come if... I raised my hand gently. Please don't. Because the night was already over, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite it. I stepped back again. Just slightly. Enough to make it clear. I'm not upset anymore. Pause. I'm just not waiting anymore. That sentence changed everything, because it wasn't anger, it was closure. No one moved after that. No one tried to step in. No one tried to argue. Because now, they could feel it. That distance wasn't temporary. That this moment wasn't something they could fix quickly. And for the first time, they respected the boundary. I gave them one last look. Not emotional, not cold, just clear. Then slowly, I stepped back inside and closed the door. Not out of anger, but out of understanding. Because some things don't need to stay open anymore. After I closed the door, I stood there in silence. And for the first time, I didn't feel rejected. I felt free, because I finally understood. I didn't lose support that night. I lost the illusion that I had it, and that hurt. But it also made everything clear. They called it a hobby, until strangers saw the value they never cared to see. If this story felt real, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Because sometimes, support isn't about what people say, it's about whether they show up before the world starts clapping.